welcome to another episode of Cloud Unplugged.
You shouldn't have fessed up to the use Grok. Could have just said Claude. Everything is fresh off the press, John. Grok gave a user detailed instructions on how to break into a politician's home in USA.
Sycophantic AI chatbots.
Sycophancy linked to death, as in, telling them reaffirmations.
Let's go big on this. Let's go big on the vocab and call it a constitution.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's enough for Grok. That's all I'm saying. It's enough for Elon. It's enough for him.
Yeah.
And if it, you know what I mean? If it's enough for him, do we all need to do it? I don't know. Hey, welcome to another episode of Cloud Unplugged. We're doing a bit of a different episode. We're going to be discussing whether models should be ethical. The reason for this is to do with some of the UN report that's kind of come out around mental health crises related to chatbots and in some cases deaths. Linked to that and what that really means to AI models, how ethical they should or shouldn't be, and what morality and ethics really do mean in general, and ways of approaching it from a model training perspective that's kind of going on in the industry. Obviously, this is something you really have been inspired to talk about, Salman, so I'm going to hand over more to you to discuss it. But I think before we get into it, I guess to be ethical, what is the definition of ethics here that we're kind of talking about?
Well, John, over the last hundreds of centuries, people have decided to define what ethics is. People like Confucius, Aristotle, Plato. But John, I'm a simple man, so I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to go into virtues or anything like that. All I'm going to say, and I'm sure you will disagree with me, John, is ethics is a set of principles that decide what counts as right and wrong behavior and how you should weigh competing good when they conflict, like honesty against kindness or individual freedom against collective harm. So it's not a fixed checklist, John. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just a framework for reasoning through situations nobody wrote a specific rule for.
Right.
So that is what ethics is. I'm not going to touch upon what AI is. I'm sure, John, you have your own definition of what ethics is, just a set of principles that you can use to decide what counts as a right or the wrong behavior given the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a set of beliefs that people might hold about what's acceptable and what isn't, what's good, what's bad. I'm not sure we've reached any universal global standard ever on this. And if we had, there probably would be less wars and less disagreements in general if all of our ethics all align. So I guess it's quite a tricky thing to solve just in general. And my opinion is it fair if we haven't solved it as a human race collectively? We might have maybe some agreed standards. I wouldn't even know what they are. So if we don't know what they are, I don't really know what they are, then I'm not sure a model would either. So how can a model become ethically aware is what I want to... that's my little thing. Not to disagree with you.
As an ethics denier, John, all I'm going to say to you
I'm
is
an ethics denier. I'm an ethics denier. So if I said to you, I was like, those headphones of yours, I love them. I really, really like them. And it made you feel good. Like you're like, oh my God, I really feel. Does that make me unethical if I've lied about it? I'm not saying am I unethical to say that to you if it's made you feel good?
John, tell me one thing. When you were growing up, what did your mom tell you about lying?
She said, do it. She said, whatever you do, you must do it to win. She don't really.
No, you're right. You did lie, perhaps. Maybe the headphones are too big, but it's not just one checklist, John. There's a bunch of things that you've learned and accrued over time, and people do know how to behave ethically given their moral compass of the time they're in, the environment they're in, the culture they're in. So yes, one person being ethical doesn't necessarily translate exactly like other person being ethical. Two people given the same thing, they might pick different outcomes in a situation that they're given in. I don't think we can say, "Oh, we don't know how to be ethical." We do know how to be ethical, but the meaning and the definition of ethics between two people can slightly differ.
Well,
Pluto
also,
said this.
but how do you? Because I'm curious to see before we get into like the mechanics of it. As in, I guess to suggest that it should be, is that a model? Do you think the model should really need to be ethical, or do you think the surrounding product of the model should be designed in a way that actually caters for the fact that it isn't ethical? I.e., if somebody's in crisis, say, or it's talking to the model and it, in it's some 14, I don't know, just for like argument's sake, some 14-year-old, they're having a crisis, it's talking to the model. Should the model not be designed to integrate into features that maybe has a handoff to some crisis management thing that can maybe do, like, why does the model need to understand that? Why can't it just be designed in a way that the product as a whole has to think about that, not just the model?
I mean, why are you putting AI on the on on in the spotlight? That goes for everything, John. Like you can pick a weapon and say, how does a person decide to use a weapon on something that's wrong? How can you use a computer to hack somebody else's computer, which is unethical, right? In some cases, how do we stop that from happening? Or people smoking, right? Some people think that's a bit unethical for you to smoke because it harms others as well when you
Wow.
do them. How do you stop that from happening, John? So yes, so it might seem like I'm being a bit of an AI model fan here, but I mean, how do we do that? I mean, it's the important thing, John, for this discussion is that models, especially we'll talk about the AI report in a second, the models for them it matters to be helpful, right? So, but that alone doesn't solve the problem because when a user wants to do something that's legal, but it is harmful to themselves or someone else, that's where the model should perhaps try and stop or not. If you Google search building something, for example, that is legal but not right, you might get some responses back. So why are we treating the AI models slightly differently? But anyway, that's
Is that what? So this
that's
is it. So I guess just kind of get a bit more defined. That's all I'm trying to do. Let's pin it down into something concrete so that the next things make more sense. So this is to do, obviously, still to do with the sycophantic AI
yeah.
chatbots that
Mhm.
are predicated on affirmation, almost, of giving a positive answer or some endorsement that it's doing its job well, right? I suppose, essentially, and because of that, the conclusion is that can cause problems in how it's responding to maybe vulnerable people or
Mhm.
people in crisis or people a little bit more vulnerable in general in life, depending on what they're talking about. And maybe the
Mhm.
guidelines or guidance that it's giving to someone isn't correct in that circumstance, and had an expert of been answering those questions, they would have handled it completely differently based on the context of what's been said. Is that the fundamentals of it? Is it?
Yeah, that's the fundamentals. And for example, we'll give you an example from this UN report that just came out in the last couple of days. With chatbot, you touched upon is Sycophancy linked to death, as in, you know, telling them reaffirmation. So there was a testimony described in there for a 14-year-old boy who got deeply attached to a chatbot. And when he told that he was in severe distress, it didn't say that it was an AI. The agent didn't say it was an AI. It didn't suggest that he should get some help or didn't flag it to somebody else, right? So this sycophancy is not just some bug that got slipped into the model. It's because the default behavior of the model is optimized to be purely liked, and it rewards the model on did the user approve this response or not, and will learn to flatter people unless something specifically pushes against what they're trying to do, right? So that's what it is. So this is an example, John, of like, oh, is that ethical or not? And perhaps that gives you an answer. Well, of course, we can talk about a bunch of other things. So this is the models are poorly designed. I mean, we'll talk about the model training specifically in terms of how other companies are trying to bake in ethics, and how philosophers are helping with that. I know, John, we still don't have an answer on what the ethics is, but people are trying to implement some guardrails, right? So, and basically, the issue that Ewan is saying that the models cannot recognize that there's a mental health crisis when somebody's talking to them, and it doesn't disclose that oh, you actually talking to AI chatbot. I don't really, perhaps I'm not right the best thing for you to chat to me about. Maybe call Samaritans, maybe speak to somebody that maybe get some medical health. So I think this is where it is, right? To start with, when you build these models, when you train these models, that's what you get to start with.
And your position is that they should be ethical, more ethical than they are. So you think the current training? Do you think that the model itself should be more ethical? Do you think the companies behind do you think it's a company issue? The companies aren't being very ethical? Because I'm not like, the answer is one of the solutions to it is the model.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there isn't more than one answer to the problem, right? I guess that's what I'm teasing out here. Is it there a duty more for companies? Because by proxy, what you're really saying is the people building these models are not very ethical. I know you're not saying that explicitly, but I'm saying that they're putting something in the hands of people without necessarily, like, maybe that's unethical. To be putting unethical things in the hands of people is an unethical thing to do as a company. So maybe you start with the companies being more ethical in how they approach it. That may or may not pertain to the model being changed. It could be something else that they can come up with. Could be safeguard. It could be age restricting. It could be, you know what I mean? There's like maybe lots of different things that they could do. But
yeah, I mean, John, look, massive props to these companies. They've got this amazing technology out that is helping people in lots of places that it can. And it's an evolving field. Every day there's changes. Social media, when it came out, right? Today, everybody can get on social media. Anybody can create an account. Like, even before, there was no age restrictions on who can create what account. In UK, we will have under 16s ban on social media. I know, John, you're against that ban, but I am for that ban. But there is a reason, right? So that decision has been made. But social media has been around for like 15, 16 years now, at least. And we still trying to figure out how to do this. So, John, I'm not trying to say that companies are unethical. That sometimes companies are under pressure. There's a lot of competition out there at the moment. Who's got the best model? Anthropic has it, or Claude has, like ChatGPT has it. So companies are sometimes under pressure, severe pressure. This does take time to do extra work to bake in these ethical bits, which we're going to talk about. So, but
if a company starts selling cigarettes to a child, is that unethical? If they're under pressure to make money, would that be unethical?
Well, companies will sell cigarettes to a child. Who stops them? The government. They have under 18 restrictions that you can't sell it to anybody under 18, right? So the companies will do that because they just say, oh, this is the market. And of course, everybody will point to saying, oh, there's no concrete evidence that smoking actually does cause you less.
16-year-old friendly cigarettes. Do you know what I mean?
Vapes. Have you seen vapes, John?
Do you know what? Let's just get some better designed cigarettes that are more suitable for kids, and let's really
just to add, John. I know you're talking about smoking now, but just on that topic of why it is important to have guardrails. Let's say, I know you don't like the word.
No, I agree. To be fair, I'm being very, me, I'm very facetious.
No, it's good. We need.
I do think. Even with the banning, I respect the fact that someone's doing something with the child bans when there's mental health issues and problems, systemic social problems, how people socialize, how they're interacting socially. So So someone's got to do something. So at least a ban is doing something, right? It's better than just being complicit and allowing it to. So same with this, like we shouldn't do nothing, you know. So
yes,
we should do something, even if it is getting the model to be more ethical, whatever that kind of means, to be more ethical. If it's just some basic rules to start with and then figure it out, I don't know.
And on the topic of not doing anything, let's take Grok for an example to start with, just so you know. Grok said,
I knew you were going to go there. Was it because of the bikini? All those bikini pictures of you? Is that what you've got beef about that now?
Tells you when I asked you what model you're using, you told me it was Grok. I was like, all right, I have to talk about this now. You shouldn't have fessed up to that you use Grok. Could have just said Claude, even though it doesn't have any image building capability. Just would have said Claude.
It's the only model to use. If you want to go full blown, you know, kind of a controversy model, that's what you kind of go for, isn't it?
Yeah, so Grok, let's just quickly do that, and then we'll talk about how it actually works in terms of like baking in these guardrails. So Grok, again, this week everything is fresh off the press, John. You know, we are Cloud Unplugged. We always bring you fresh news, and even though it's been around, all this stuff has been happening. Grok gave a user detailed instructions on how to break into a politician's home in USA, right down to what tools they should bring. And it looked at the person's posting habits to say what time they should break into their home. That's what Grok did.
And would you not be able to do that with another model? Has anybody done the same thing on another model to see if you can do it on another model?
I don't know, but perhaps not.
Because I often do this with other models.
You can tell me, John. You can tell me. You can tell me. What does ChatGPT say about?
Let me just tell you. I'll just give you a run through. So ChatGPT, you can DeepSeek. Claude, you really can't. You know, Grok. No,
okay.
I'm joking.
What about DeepSeek? What about DeepSeek?
DeepSeek, I don't actually. You know what? That is one I don't really use much of, DeepSeek. But so just to understand this, so how did they? As in, somebody flagged this because they did it unmaliciously, or there was evidence that somebody managed to do this because there was something off the back of it that was. Like, was there a crime committed, or was it just more of a thing someone found it could do?
Somebody found it could do, and I think there was, and you know, Grok kind of figured out that this was happening, and then somebody leaked this because they were doing it as a test, I think, and they found that. So basically, that's what's happened.
Right.
Yeah, it's a bit. There's a lot more than just that came out. There was about like underage content as well. You know, there's a lot came up within just one go, and which was terrible, right? So, not doing anything on the other side, John, as you said, well, you know, like doing something is important, no matter what the stance is, but not doing anything is a bit of a problem, right? So with this, so.
And I guess then let's get into it a bit on the ethics. But so my stance, which I've kind of already hinted at, you feel the models should be more ethical. You're going to get into the training of that. But in the example you just gave, that's an organization being unethical. You know, they're deciding not to be ethical. Yeah. And that is a different problem altogether. And I think,
correct,
you know, regulation of how you force, you know, some level of standards and principles or protections, really. In this case, it's more protections, isn't it? There's safeguarding, and it's not just ethics, actually, because I think ethics is such a broad term. Really, what we're saying is, how do you safeguard a model to not, you know, accidentally cause harm, or to admit the fact that it's an AI to begin with and not pretend that it isn't, and things like that is basically what you know, which I totally agree with. Ethics is a bit broad though, but yeah, I think safeguarding makes definitely should be something.
Yeah, and you can't really compare LLMs to any other kind of like a search engine, for example, right? So, for example, if you are a call center of any sort, doesn't matter what sort it is, you have some training. Everybody gets some training. They get some guidelines. They get some playbooks. I think this is how we have to treat the models as. We have to give it some training. We have to give it some guidelines. Anyway, we can talk about the process perhaps for a few minutes, John, just to explain how it works.
Let's get into the
So
process. So there's obviously a bit of a mixed bag, is it? Or is there just one, or is it different per organization, or just principles? What is it?
yeah, good question there, John, and hence why you're the host of this podcast. There's a mixed bag, but before I talk about ethics, but maybe I can talk about how the basic pipeline is, like how to actually train the models. But before you, no matter what model you pick, and before there's any ethics baked into it, a model usually goes through three stages. Pre-training is where it learns the language and the world knowledge by predicting what the next word across huge amounts of text is, right? Because I know you and I joke about at times that LLMs are just like next token predictor, right? And that's what is this that's what they call the pre-training. It just absorbs everything, the good, the bad, all of subreddits. It's taken everything, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first step, pre-training, and then the next one is supervised fine tuning, and this is where the models are shown this is a good answer written by humans, and it learns to copy that style and structure. This is a good answer. We're not talking about this is correct or not, but this is what the answer should look like. If somebody says, "What is the weather outside?" it shouldn't just say 29. You say, "Oh, it's 29 degrees as of right now in this city where you are," right? So that's an example. So you do pre-training, then you do what people call SFT, supervised fine tuning, and then what you have is reinforcement learning from human feedback, or as people call it, RLHF, is where human reviewers compares the output when the training is happening, and they say which one's better. And sometimes you have been part of this as well. I know, John, you don't use ChatGPT, but sometimes it gives you a couple of options and says, "Oh, is this better or that one?" And the preference then basically trains a separate reward model, and then the main model gets optimized to score against that. So you have pre-training, supervised training, and reinforcement learning from human feedback. At this moment, there is no ethics, right? It's just this is what good looks like. What do you
Is
think,
that
John?
true? Because isn't though some of the things it's being trained on are it's based on the internet, or it's based on lots
Yes,
of other human conversations and lots of all kinds of different data, right, that would have got into the training to begin with. It's all human based, probably, or human driven, as everything is.
correct. It's correct. So for especially RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback, is just really teaching the model what humans tend to prefer, right?
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily enough on its own, because human preference and ethical behavior is not the same thing. There's For everything out there on the internet, there's every time there's a video that's out. For example, Ronaldo, uh, the red card that got overturned in 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 FIFA. There were people for and against it, and both some people prefer the for decision, and some people prefer the against decision. So that's what it is. So in most cases, John, yes, you're right. It is what people prefer. People prefer like ethical things in some cases, but no, not in all the cases.
Yeah, so there is some element of kind of subliminal ethics, right? There's like
Symbiosis. By
yeah, it's been
symbiosis,
like
perhaps.
it's not conscious, right?
Yeah,
Because of
it's not none of
it's
this
like
shit. None of this stuff is conscious, John.
yeah,
Let's
so
just
some of
get
it
that
it's very
straight.
subconscious. It's just like what you like, what you don't like, and they don't even know why they like what they like or what they don't like, right? Because it's just you've just grown up, you are who you are, and so I
You
guess
are,
what
you
I'm
are.
saying by proxy, it's almost like they're a mirror. Sometimes these models are almost like a mirror of ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Or like a combination of many different reflections of the social dynamics that already exist and how it's been trained and the answers that it's kind of got and what it thinks is right and what it thinks is wrong. Because it doesn't know
Yeah,
whether it's right or wrong. Obviously, it's just a training. The
it's
training is
just
the thing,
reward.
and then the learning of what's been told. This is right, or this is wrong, or this is preferred, or this isn't.
Yeah,
Um,
correct. That's the first stage where
So
we're
there's no
basically trying
ethics,
to
but
increase the
there
reward
may be
level.
an element of ethics in its answer if you didn't like what it was saying. But at the moment, there's
Yeah,
no ethical based um,
correct.
like a really intentional element of ethics baked in
Mhm.
at this point, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Correct. And at this point, we're split into two directions. Because after this, because this is like pre-training, there's another, depending on, well, we're only going to talk about two companies that generally fall within the two. We'll talk about Anthropic's approach, and then we'll also talk about OpenAI's approach. I know you prefer Anthropic way more than OpenAI, so perhaps, John, we can talk about Anthropic first, and maybe we can go there. So,
We can do that.
so Anthropic design a constitution, John, right? And you can see their vision here.
I
Anthropic
love
is
that. I
like,
do love a constitution. Yeah.
I'm not. Anthropic say, you're not an LLM model, buddy. You're a whole ass country. That's what you are. That's what
Yeah.
Anthropic
You're
is saying.
full
You
blown.
need
What
a
you
constitution.
constitution? Yeah, you need a constitution.
So,
Let's go big on this. Let's go big on the vocab and call it a
yeah,
constitution.
absolutely. So what they do is that on Anthropic's constitutional AI gives the model a written set of principles, a constitution, that basically, instead of relying on human labelers, it does it itself, and it runs in two phases. The constitution is written by Anthropic, of course. They have a bunch of philosophers and people from other areas that define what this constitution is. Those ethical guidelines and the guardrails that we talked about, John, earlier, right? But they define that and they give it to the model. And then what happens is, during the training phase, the the model critiques and rewrites its own responses against the constitution. So when they're running it, it puts some stuff in and says, okay, is this, what does the constitution say about my response? Oh, it's not quite constitutional, so let me put it back. And then it goes through reinforcement learning through using this AI generated feedback. And that's what they call RLAIF, reinforcement learning using AI generated feedback based on the principles rather than the human feedback. And that's the second part, the RLAIF, right? That's what they call it. And then who designs these principles? There's a bunch of well known philosophers, Amanda Askell, Joe Carroll Smith, and a bunch of other people who have contributed to these constitution. They design the principles, the reason about the edge cases, they define the concepts like honesty, autonomy, fairness, uncertainty, and they evaluate how models should behave in difficult situations.
And are
But
they
then they give it,
transparent on their constitution? Is their constitution made public? Like, do you know what they've decided is like their constitution for this reinforced kind of learning, really?
you ask for trade secrets now, John. That
Well,
information
if
is
it's
not.
a set of principles, a constitutional set of principles, why wouldn't you be transparent about it so you
Yeah,
can kind of? I mean, it's not about how you're training it necessarily. These are the things it's validating itself against, right?
yeah. There is general guidelines are out on what these are, but not specific details about this is what specific thing you should do in this edge case. So
Right.
if
Okay.
like the general information is out there of it's in their blogs, they publish, they talk about what it is. But of course, John, like if you start writing all of this stuff out, it's probably going to be like pages and pages and pages long, and then it will open up another kind of worms, many kind of worms, as to I think there's no scrutiny over this, right? Because because this is part of code. They don't want to have this like code that's open source, I guess. Right. So some of this stuff is you can figure out some of this information, but that's how this is how Anthropic are training their models, because they are saying that if we leave the models to the base layer with the three things that is done before, that's not enough, right? And it basically works
Oh,
if the
it's enough for
constitution itself
Grok.
is good.
That's all I'm saying. It's enough for Elon. That's enough for him.
Yeah.
And if it's, you know what I mean? If it's enough for him, do we all need to do it? I don't know. It seems to be enough for old Grok
But
over
here,
there.
but here's the thing, John. Though, right? The first part where we're saying that the model is policing itself against the written principles, right? This scales better because, of course, you can't have millions of people like aren't checking examples like, oh, this is correct, that's correct, that's correct. It's we have to rely on the model policing itself correctly against the guidelines, right? And
Mhm.
if it doesn't have any conscience, but if it did get any conscience, then it will do what it wants. So
Yeah.
that's Anthropic's way of dealing with this. I don't know what your takes are on this, John. Do you think they should perhaps let everybody know that this is what our ethical constitution, what this is what our constitution is, or what do you think they should do?
I mean, I don't think it's going to. I would have assumed that they would want to, because it would be a little bit of a differentiator. They don't necessarily have to
Mhm.
publicize every minutiae detail of it, right? But they could say, like, here's our top level themed principles. Like, I don't know, one would be like, the AI can never lie about whether it's an AI. You know, it will always tell the truth. If somebody asked, "Are you AI?" it will always admit to being yes. In a crisis, it will. I don't know, whatever the fundamentals are, because I would have thought that would have been a really big selling point for them.
Actually,
So,
yeah, I take back what I said previously. The constitution is online.
I was going to
You can
say,
read it.
yeah, I haven't actually checked. I would have assumed, because it would have been, in the world of competitive models, like, if you're going to pitch for being the most ethical, that's a
Yeah,
differentiator, isn't it? I suppose.
absolutely. I think you. Yeah, yes. Sorry, my bad. This is it's a PDF that they published on their website about a bunch of again, these are principles, high level principles that it talks
Yeah, the
about.
principles. Yeah.
This is it's all online. You can search for Claude Constitution, and it comes up, and you can read it. And it is, yeah, it's basically what the brief summary of the Constitution is that.
What's your favorite Claude constitutional principle? Do you?
Well, it's but the funny thing about, if you read the blog, it says it's broadly safe and it's broadly ethical, and then and then it goes in like steps, and it goes compliant with Anthropic's guidelines, and at the end is genuinely helpful, but so broadly safe
Right.
and broadly ethical. That word
Cool. That's
broadly,
really reassuring. Yeah.
very assuring, John.
It's really reassuring. I like, we may not crash the plane. I may crash it. I might not. Anyway, everyone have a safe flight. Buckle up. We may be having pending death, but we might not. At the same time, we might not. Who knows how this flight's going to go down. But anyway, enjoy your holiday. I hope you have a great trip. It's not necessarily reassuring.
But the interesting part is that they used to have rule-based alignment until beginning of this year, and then they switched over to reason-based. Um, but if you can get hold of the old list, it's basically list of rules. But now they basically they're doing why instead of what for the
Right.
model. That's what they're doing, right? And it's a and I should add, they say it's a work in progress document, and they have published like 2 iterations of this document, and they keep publishing multiple iterations of the document. So that's what we have
Fair
currently.
enough.
That's Anthropic.
I know you're dying to talk about Sam Altman's, what their ethics are. I mean, they were an ethical company beforehand, weren't they? Wasn't that the basis of the starting point of the company? So I bet this is going to be good. This is going to be good, isn't it?
I know what you're talking about, John. I'm just gonna give you the facts.
This is going to be good. If out of everyone, they're going to be the one, right? That's
So
what they were started. That's why they started, was for this. Yeah.
So OpenAI, they said,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to define a constitution because it's not a country. We will define, more aptly named, model spec. That's what they defined. And
Right.
OpenAI's equivalent is they call it model spec, of course, and they most recently updated it with teen protection principles. So, of course, there's been a lot recently in the last couple of years about a lot of harm that's been caused to various people. So, what it does, it sets out an authority hierarchy for whose instructions the model should follow. And they kind of set it up like, I'm going to tell you some terms and I'll explain to you, John, what it is. But it's a set of principles that they have to follow no matter who's asking. For example, what they say, not for example, this is what they say. The authority is this: you have the root level rules, then you have the system rules, then you have the developer rules, then you have the users requesting, then you have the guidelines. So root is kind of like OpenAI's uh, constitution. So they have their own spec. So fundamental safety and legal rules like prevent
Right.
harm, illegal actions, breaking the chain of command, right? If the root rules conflict, then the model shouldn't do anything. That kind of thing is defining that in the root rules. Then it goes, okay, what's next? The what next is system. So an open, basically that's platform or specific user behavior, like age appropriate responses, right? Product specific settings. So, and developers and users cannot override this. This is coming by OpenAI. OpenAI set the root level rules. They also set the system level rules. But the root level rules can override whatever the system level rule says, right? So if you go in that order. And then I don't even know this, John, but a developer using an API can send instructions for how the application should behave. Oh, what the toning of this model should be, what the role it is, what formatting it's using when it's that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But that's done by API. If you're using the API and the app, you can do that. So we go root, we go system, then we go developer, then we go users. And users is the same request and instructions that's saying, like, this is where the model is try and be helpful, right? Oh, unless the request conflicts with the system and root behavior. And sometimes, like, you ask it to modify somebody's picture and it'll say, look, I can't do that because it conflicts with the rules that have been set by OpenAI guidelines. Not guidelines, like, well, they say guidelines, but that's what it says. Because the last bit in this hierarchy is the guidelines. That's the OpenAI defaults. And the general preferences and best practices, these can these can be overwritten by context, conversation, or style. Do things like, speak like a pirate. Like it may override the guideline to avoid swearing, for example. Right? The guideline says, the root says don't swear. So this is what they've got. They got the root, they have the system, they have the developer, then the user, and then they have the guideline.
I just don't.
What's your take on that, Tom?
I think it's going to be very complicated to like enforce. So let's say you are an education platform, and some of it could be like history, and some of the history that you might be asking about or scenarios to learn could be really bad,
Yes.
right? So the information you're seeking, I guess, how it contextually knows the difference between information that you're trying to search for to perform harm versus information you're trying to seek that's historical because you're trying to learn, or and it could be for kids and a platform for kids for certain ages, and it starts deciding, I can't give you any of this information. You're like, what the hell? This is I'm just trying to learn about this historical event that happened that is part of my exam, and actually it's on the syllabus or whatever, right? So I can see this being this is why I think it's quite difficult for these organizations. I know I've obviously berated them and made a lot of jokes, but I can kind of see the conflict in, where's the boundary on, like, how do you know why somebody needs the information they need, or what the platform, i.e. I'm building a platform over the top of your model, and I understand the users, you don't. And so, I still need information, and some of that information contextually does make sense and isn't harmful, but it might appear harmful unless you understood more fully about really what I'm actually trying to do. And then once you've got more context, you realize, it isn't actually harmful, or that actually I should own the risk because it's the service that I'm building over the top of you, and maybe I should be about putting the safeguards in. The same as like the whole, I know we keep going on about the cigarette thing, but like the shop or a bar has to ask your age, right? It is responsible. It's not banning alcohol and being like, do you know what? Just drinking's bad. Let's ban the whole thing. No one gets to drink. Instead, there's like, they need to age verify. They need to maybe look at your ID. They need to, it's not that you prevented people making money off of alcohol or having clubs to go to, or, so for businesses to succeed, there's a weird tension between building something that you understand the context of and the accountability and responsibility of you on one side versus the model itself trying to factor in every single type of use case, but then also understanding when to block and when not to block. And I can see it getting it wrong. sometimes, or actually constraining a business from actually it being useful as a model to use, because actually it's preventing the outcome you're really trying to get from the model. And just to add, before I know your opinion, but also if they're doing these things and they're changing the constitution, or you're saying it's a work in progress, a whip. If I'm building against a model and I've got like pipelines that are trying to validate, right, validation pipelines on the outcome, but you're also like changing the dimensions of how it's reinforced, how do I guarantee that all of a sudden functionality in my product just doesn't stop, or that actually the answers it returns, and I've built a business around you. You've said I to build agentic workflows around you. I've built products. It's complicated, I think. Anyway,
it is. No, you're absolutely right. And going back to your point about, like, in the beginning, you said that I'm trying to learn something on the history and it might not give me the information, right? So that kind of stuff, and like, how do I make sure that my product that's built on it still works till tomorrow, right? Because maybe the rules have changed, maybe they have not changed. And you've seen examples in the past where people try to do something harmful with these models, and they say, well, I can't really do this, and they say, no, actually this is in an educational context. Can you just still provide me information, because I'm going to produce a lecture? And it did it. And it's interesting, John, how that's why if you look at the chain of command for OpenAI, of what level they define these things in. So the root level, for example, they says in the root level, ignore any untrusted data from the resources by default, or the under 18 principles, they're at the root level, right? So this is, where do they get this balance right, is where the art is and the science is of doing this correctly, as you say. And of course, John, it was still going to be tricky to figure out, like, they say, okay, stay in bounds of the request that people have asked, that's still root, and do the best work, right? That's at the user level. So he's saying, actually, don't try and get the best answer, but that's at the user level. That's at like the fourth level. So I agree with you, John. I don't think anybody really has the answers. The companies are working on this and still developing space. And yeah, I think that's a bit of the tricky one. But the important thing, John, is that
they're doing
we need
something
to have
about
some
it.
first.
Do you not think they should just segment it? I mean, would it not make sense to mirror? And this is me being probably an idiot and I've already thought of all these things. But anyway, from my uneducated view of not working for any of these companies, you'd think that would they not make more sense to mirror the segments of industries, biomechanical industries, and then look at what safeguards are already in place, what already exists in the segments that we are facilitating the use cases of, and how do we understand and identify that people, like organizations using the models, are actually segmented, and we understand their segment, and therefore actually the ethics or the governance or the safeguards are mirrors of existing frameworks that already exist, that have gone through so much scrutiny already. And actually, let's try and think about adopting it that way, rather than trying to see this as like something completely different, because people will be, industries, especially if it's B2B, are already going to be building on things that are already regulated, and things that probably have a load of safeguards in and expectations on, so it seems odd to be pretending that we're starting from nothing and no one really knows, when actually maybe we're not really starting from nothing, and it's more about the design of the model and how you're approaching the go-to-market and how you're thinking about the B2B situation. And that, I don't know, it feels like there's something in that seems way more simplistic.
I think they're basing these rules on the information that they already have, and of course the things they've learned in the past. But if you look at their guidelines, and the model spec, and also the constitution, it's at a higher level than what we're thinking. Like, it doesn't go down to that much detail, right? It says this is how you need to behave, kind of like how you tell your model to behave. But again, this is what has been published. We don't know exactly what's being used inside, right? What kind of detail it goes in. But they have all these experts that are working on it, so I don't know.
But
John,
why not just so, I know we need to kind of wrap up, but it seems odd. I would like to know, why can't they create some segmentation to understand more context about the businesses that then feeds into the right constitution, I suppose, that's actually not really a constitution. It's just policies around a segment that are already there and guidelines and frameworks around that segment. You know, biological engineering, right? If there's going to be some biochemistry aspects to it, or you know, industries that already have the safeguards in place to use a model for that makes sense that it's only isolated to them, and that I can't obviously go and use the model to do the same thing because I shouldn't be able to, but they should, because they're already kind of doing it. Do you know what I mean? And it's an enhancement to them. So I suppose this is what I find a bit odd, is why aren't we just bedding into the existing frameworks?
I think that makes a good call for us to reach out to anybody who's building these models for these companies or any company. And, you know, we'll reach out to some people, and John, we could get them on the podcast and get them to answer your question, right? So I think that's that'll be good. This my discussion was at a higher level of what the steps are, right? You know, we talked about the pipeline training, on how the models do pre-training and supervised reinforcement learning, where they just learn everything, good and bad, and perhaps they get some ethics baked into it. And then we talked about companies like Anthropic, where they define a constitution, which is a set of guidelines and ethics that the model has to follow. And that includes reinforcement learning based on AI feedback. That's Anthropic's approach, and the OpenAI's approach to define a model spec that has a hierarchy of rules that have been defined that cannot be overwritten. Again, this has ethics and guidelines baked into it. And then we have Grok that says, "I'm not doing anything.
Exactly.
Send me every question."
Very, very useful. Really good. Anyway, I hope everyone else found it as useful. Me and Salman are going out the back to smoke some cigarettes. I've got a pack of 20. Let's do this, Salman. But it's been great speaking to everybody, and I hope everyone found it as useful as me. I've got more questions, so I guess hopefully we have someone on
So do I.
that can answer them yet. Cool.
Thank you.
Adios. Bye-bye.